Good morning, church. This morning's reading is from 1 Kings 16:29 to 17:1. Excuse me. Ahab, king of Israel. Ahab became king of Israel. It was in the 38th year that Asa was king of Judah. Ahab ruled over Israel in Samaria for 22 years. He was the son of Omri. Ahab, the son of Omri, did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did more evil things than any of the kings who had ruled before him. He thought it was only a small thing to commit the sins Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, had committed. Ahab also married Jezebel. She was Ethbaal's daughter. Ethbaal was king of the people of Sidon. Ahab began to serve the god named Baal and worship him. He set up an altar to honour Baal. He set it up in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made a pole used to worship the female god named Asherah. He made the Lord very angry. Ahab did more to make him angry than all the kings of Israel had done before him. The Lord is the God of Israel. In Ahab's time, he, from Bethel, rebuilt Jericho. When he laid its foundations, it cost him the life of his oldest son, Abiram. When he set up its gates, it cost him the life of his youngest son, Segub. That's what the Lord had said would happen. He had spoken it through Joshua, the son of Nun. Elijah announces no dew or rain. Elijah was from Tisbeh in the land of Gilead. He said to Ahab, "I serve the Lord. He is the God of Israel. You can be sure that he lives, and you can be just as sure that there won't be any dew or rain on the whole land. There won't be any during the next few years. It won't come until I say so." This is the word of the Lord.
Hi, I'm Obadiah. Thanks, David. That's good. I just wanted to introduce myself to you all. I had a bit of an exciting time, and you might know that my boss is King Ahab, you see, and King Ahab's a bit of a, you've got to be careful with him. But his wife, Jezebel, oh, gosh, I worship God, the Lord God, for a long time. Got to keep it a bit quiet. But, Jezebel, she went around killing all the prophets and everything, and I knew that wasn't right. So you know what I did? I hid 100 of them in a cave, 50 in one cave, 50 in the other. And I gave them food and water, and I hid them there, and they were safe. But one day, this sort of amazing thing happened. Ahab said to me, there's a terrible famine in Samaria, and I'm a bit worried about the horses and the mules. Wasn't too worried about the rest of the people, but anyway, he was worried about the horses and the mules, that they were going to die. And he said to me, look, Obadiah, I think what we should do is go down to the springs and the valleys and, see whether we can get some grass, then we can feed the horses and the mules. So that's what we did. We went out, and he went this way and I went this way. And, I'm going along looking, and all of a sudden, I see, it looks like Elijah. Is that really you, Elijah? And Elijah says to me, yeah, it's me. And I said, but everybody's looking for you, Elijah, And he says, yes, I know. He said, but I've got a task for you to do. I want you to do something. I said, okay. What do you want me to do, Elijah? He says, you've got to go to King Ahab and tell him that I'm here. And I went, hey, whoa, wait a minute here. You want me to go and tell him that? You know what happens? If I go and tell him that, I could be dead because, he's been going around looking for people. He's gone to all the nations and the kingdoms and everything. And when they say they don't know where he is, he said to them, you've got to swear that because, I want to make sure you've got to swear that you don't know where he is. So, if I say I know where you are and then the Spirit of the Lord takes you off somewhere else and Ahab, comes and you're not there, guess what will happen to me? That's the end of me. How come you chose me? I've been worshipping God from when I was young and all that, And you know what else I did, Elijah? I just remind you, I hid those 100 prophets for God and gave them food and water and stuff. And now you want me to do this really scary thing. And Elijah said, Obadiah, it is me. And I will meet with Ahab. You've just got to go and tell him. So I did. I went and told Ahab and he met with him. But there's more to that story and you're going to hear some more in a minute. So stay tuned, okay?
Thanks. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name's Mary. I'm one of the pastors here at Knightsbridge Baptist. And I'm going to tell the rest of the story that you started to hear from Obadiah. Before I start, though, I just want to mention, last week Simon preached a sermon and he talked about some of the things that are going on in the world and the wrestle that we have when we know that things can be better than they are. And next Sunday, we often have praise and worship nights. Next Sunday, we're planning to have what would normally be a praise and worship night, but we're actually going to do a bit more of a reflective time with a little bit of worship but some prayer and just enter into a space of reflection around some of these big things that are going on in the world. So I just wanted to let you know because it's a bit like we're supposed to have a praise and worship night and I've been a bit slack organising it, but Rachel was really keen and Lindy I think is going to help out with a bit of that planning to put together something. So if you've been sort of looking at the world or even some things going on in our community and wrestling with where is God in all of this, I invite you to come along to that. We'll probably be in the hall instead of in this room. So I'll email out some more information this week, but I just wanted to let you know, especially off the back of what Simon said last week. But today we are going to talk about the rest of this story with Elijah. And I want to let you know something that I'm going to be doing today, because in this story there are lots of gods. There's some little g gods like Baal and Asherah, and there's some capital G, there's one capital G God, and that is the God that we know. And because there's so many gods that we're talking about, I'm going to try not to use the word God. I'm going to use the word Yahweh when I talk about the God of Israel. So Yahweh, when you hear me say that, that is the word, that is the name that the people of Israel used for their God, and that is the God that we worship. Okay, so that will help us remember who is who. Now, at this point in the story that we've heard, the nation of Israel had split into two kingdoms. That's what the kids learnt about in kids' church last week. There is the northern kingdom of Israel, consisting of 10 of the tribes, and the southern kingdom of Judah, consisting of the other 2 tribes. And one thing you need to know about I've got to turn this on. There we go. See this little bit that's poking out here? That is where Mount Carmel is. And we're going to hear all about Mount Carmel later. But for now, northern kingdom of Israel. So used to the whole thing was known as Israel, but then they split off and we've got the kingdom of Israel in the north, the kingdom of Judah in the south. And we're talking about the kingdom of Israel in the north. Ahab was the king of this northern kingdom. And he was married to Jezebel from Phoenicia, which is above the northern kingdom. And she worshipped the gods Baal and Asherah. And it's also important to know that Baal was the storm god. He was also a fertility god. He was responsible for rain, for thunder, for fire, and the fertility of the crops. That means whether or not the farmers would be able to harvest what they had grown for food. Or at least this is what the people of Phoenicia believed about Baal. Okay, so he was in charge of rain and the crops growing. But because Ahab had led the people away from Yahweh and towards worship of Baal, doing what was right in his own eyes, Elijah, who was Yahweh's prophet, so a prophet is someone who points us back to the truth of Yahweh. Elijah prayed that it would not rain on the land, and it didn't. So there was a couple of years of drought. And in the third year without rain, Elijah ran into Obadiah, and we've heard that story. And he told Obadiah, it's time for Ahab and I to meet. So I'm going to tell the rest of this story from 1 Kings 18. Obadiah went back to Ahab, and he told Ahab that Elijah wanted to see him. So Ahab went to where Elijah was. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you? You're always stirring up trouble in Israel." But Elijah replied, "I haven't made trouble for Israel, but you have, and your father's family have. You have turned away from the Lord's commands, and you have followed gods that are named Baal." So this might seem like an argument about troublemakers, who's the biggest troublemaker, but it is really an argument about who is in charge. If Baal was so great and powerful, then Elijah wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. But Elijah has prayed to Yahweh that it will not rain, and it is not raining. That shows that Baal really doesn't have control over the earth, but the people are still worshipping Baal. It's really Ahab who has caused so much trouble for Israel by disobeying Yahweh and chasing after Baal and Asherah. Now, Elijah says, "I want you to send for people from all over Israel. Tell them to meet me on Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of the god named Baal, and also bring 400 prophets of the female god named Asherah." That's 4 times as many people, actually 8 times as many people about as are in this room. That's a lot of people, as well as the people from Israel. All of these prophets are given preference by Jezebel, so Ahab's wife. And so Ahab sent that message through all of Israel, and he gathered the prophets together on Mount Carmel. So it is now time for Ahab and the people to choose who they will follow. Elijah tells him to bring people from all across Israel, as well as these prophets of Baal and Asherah, to Mount Carmel. Now, this mountain, as you've seen on the map before, was right up the top of the land of Israel. It's close to where Israel met Phoenicia, where Jezebel was from. And the Phoenicians, who worshipped Baal, they thought of this place, this mountain, as a sacred home for Baal. This is where the god lived. And they would worship him there. So it's almost like Elijah is saying, hey, we're going to go to where your God has the home field advantage, and I'm going to show you what's what. So Elijah went up to Mount Carmel with all the people, and he stood in front of them. He said, "How long will it take you to make up your minds? If the Lord, Yahweh, is the one and only God, worship him. But if Baal is the one and only God, worship him." This gets a little bit missed in some of our translations, but the language that Elijah uses is a bit like hopping or dancing between 2 spots. It's not that Yahweh's people have abandoned him altogether, but they're trying to worship Baal and Yahweh at the same time. We have a really big word for this. It's called syncretism, where bits and pieces of different religions or practices are all jumbled together. It happens anytime we start to rely on Yahweh and something else. Something like Yahweh and enough money to be comfortable, or Yahweh and the way that we worship, or Yahweh and being in the right friend group, or having the right job, or having the right politician in charge of our country. What's sad is that when Elijah does his job as the prophet, he challenges the people and he calls them back to the truth of Yahweh. Do you know what happens? The people don't say anything. He says to them, "How long will you go about doing this, worshipping 2 gods?" And they just don't have an answer. So then Elijah says to them, "I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left." And we actually know that's not true because Obadiah's been hiding people. And Elijah knows that that's not true, but I think Maybe he's trying to keep them safe by not saying he knows they're alive. I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. So get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves. Let them cut it into pieces. Then let them put it on the wood. But don't let them set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull. I'll put it on the wood, but I won't set fire to it either. And then you pray to your God, and I'll pray to the Lord, to Yahweh. And the God who answers by sending fire down is the one and only God. So Elijah lays down the challenge between Yahweh and Baal. And he is actually, if you read this carefully, he's planning to give the Baal worshippers all of the advantages. They get the best choice of everything. They get to go first. They get to choose the best sacrifice. They have no time limit. There are so many more prophets to be heard by their God. And again, they're on Baal's home turf, in his arena. All they have to do is set up a sacrifice, and the true God will reveal themselves by sending fire down to burn up the sacrifice. Pretty simple. Well, even more than the people's disappointing non-answer before is what they answer now. All the people said, "What you're saying is good." What? Shouldn't they have said something like, No, Elijah, we know that Yahweh is the one and only God. We don't need to have this competition. We'll head back down the mountain, we'll tear down all our idols, and we'll turn back to God right now. Isn't that the right answer? But they don't. They're like, "Oh, okay, sounds like a good idea to me, let's do it." It's crazy. So Elijah says to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls. There are many of you. So prepare your bull first, pray to your God, but don't light the fire." And so they did what they'd been told. They prayed to Baal from morning until noon. That's middle of the day, lunchtime. "Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there wasn't any reply. No one answered. Then they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to tease them. He said, "Shout louder. I'm sure Baal must be a god, but maybe he has too much to think about. Maybe he has gone to the toilet. Or maybe he's away on a trip." And if you think that's not actually in the Bible, you're wrong. It's actually in there. "Maybe he's sleeping. You might have to wake him up." So the prophets shouted louder. Now, it's a bit funny to think about Elijah making fun of the prophets in this way, especially during the middle of a big, serious moment, right? Who would make jokes at that time? But I don't think it's just teasing. The things that Elijah says about the God that they are trying, they're trying to get this God's attention, and the things that Elijah says, they're not really things that you would say about mystical, supernatural beings, right? People in the ancient Near East, people in those times, they understood gods aren't humans, and they aren't limited by the things that limit humans. Gods don't need to take time out to think. They don't need holidays, they don't need sleep, and they definitely don't need to use the toilet. Elijah is making fun to point out Baal isn't really a powerful supernatural being. But sadly, the prophets keep going. They even they actually hurt themselves to try to get Baal's attention. It says in the passage that that's what they usually did when things were looking really hopeless. It was now past noon. The prophets of Baal continued to prophesy with all their might. They did it until it came time to offer the evening sacrifice. It's probably about 3 p.m. So they were going all day. But there was no reply. No one answered. No one paid any attention. They spent hours dancing, shouting, making themselves noticeable to a God that would never hear them and would never act to help. Then Elijah said to all the people, he said, "Come here close to me." So they went to him. He rebuilt the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah got 12 stones. There was one for each tribe in the family line of Jacob. The Lord's message had come to Jacob, and it had said, "Your name will be Israel." Elijah used the stones to build an altar to honor the Lord. So in the church now, there are some stones. They might be on your pew or in a pew in front of you or behind you. And I would love it if 12 people, if you have a stone near you, you might need to look behind you, could come and build our altar at the front here. So if you've got one, bring it down the front. So with this altar, even though at this point in the history of Israel, the nation was divided, Elijah built this altar out of 12 stones, and this was to remind the people of their history, of their unity. The 12 stones represent the 12 tribes of Israel, and these 12 tribes are one nation, and they worship one God. Next, Elijah dug a ditch around the altar. It says the ditch was large enough to hold about 10 kilos of seed. So a couple months ago, we had those big flour bags, or you might imagine a 10-kilo bag of rice. 10 kilos of seed would fit in that ditch that he dug around it. He arranged the wood for the fire. He cut the bull into pieces, and he placed them on the wood. And then he said to some of the people, "Fill 4 large jars with water. Pour it on the offering and the wood." So they did. This might seem a bit crazy, and I did grab this vase. 4 large jars. 4 large jars of water in the middle of a drought. 4 large jars of water onto a sacrifice that was meant to set fire. What do you think the people were thinking at this point? "Do it again," Elijah said, and they did. "Do it a third time," and they did it the third time. The water ran down around the altar, and it even filled up the ditch. 12 stones for the altar, 12 jars of water. When it was time to offer the sacrifice, the evening sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward. He prayed, "Lord, you are the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Today let everyone know that you are God in Israel. Let them know I'm your servant. Let them know I've done all these things because you commanded me to. Answer me, Lord, answer me. Then these people will know that you are the one and only God. They'll know that you are turning their hearts back to you again." What a simple prayer. Well, with that prayer, the fire of the Lord came down. It burned up the sacrifice. It burned up the wood and the stones and the soil, and it even dried up the water in the ditch. Everything was gone. All the people saw it, and they fell down flat on their faces, with their faces towards the ground, and they cried out, "The Lord is the one and only God. The Lord is the one and only God." With that simple and honest prayer, Yahweh hears Elijah and he acts. Imagine being there, having watched the prophets of Baal and Asherah dance around and shout all day, and then Elijah prays just a few sentences. Would you trust that that prayer would work? But Elijah doesn't need to do anything dramatic, and it doesn't even take a long time. Elijah prays to Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and Yahweh shows that he is and remains the one and only God. As I said, the fire is so fierce and powerful that it doesn't just burn up the sacrifice, but the stones and the soil and the water too. Then there's a bunch of activity. Elijah says to the people, "Grab the prophets of Baal, don't let them get away." And they are punished for what they've done. And then Elijah turns to Ahab and he says, who must have been there watching the whole thing, "Go, Ahab, eat and drink. I can hear the sound of a heavy rain." So Ahab goes off to eat and drink. But Elijah, he climbs back up to the top of Mount Carmel. And it says he bent down toward the ground and he put his face between his knees. I would show you, I don't think I can physically do that. Down on the ground with his face between his knees. What is Elijah about to do? Well, he had a servant with him and he tells the servant, "Go and look towards the sea." Looking west out to the sea, the servant goes and looks. But he says, "I don't see anything there." And 7 times Elijah said, "Go back and check." And on the 7th time, the servant says, "I see a cloud. It's as small as a man's hand." I'm not a man, but I have a hand, so it's coming up over the sea. So Elijah says to the servant, "Go to Ahab, tell him, tie your chariot to your horse and go down to Jezreel before the rain stops you." Black clouds filled the sky. The wind came up and a heavy rain began to fall. And so Ahab rode off to Jezreel. And it says the power of the Lord came onto Elijah. And he would have worn a long coat, so he tucked his coat up. So instead of having like a flowy skirt bit, he would have tied it up so he could run, tucked it into his belt, and he ran. And he had the power of God on him, of Yahweh. He ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel, and he was there to meet Ahab. How amazing is that? Running faster than horses with a chariot. Because Ahab and the people of Israel had been worshipping Baal, Elijah had prayed that there would be no rain. It was a way of showing that Yahweh, not Baal, was in charge of the world, in charge of creation. And now that it's clear for the people, because of the fire, it's clear for the people that Yahweh is the one and only God. Now Elijah prays that rain would return. It's not really clear why he needed to spend such a long time praying, or, there's a lot of different ideas about why there was this process of him sending the servant back and forth. But what the truth is that Elijah prays to Yahweh, and he listens. Yahweh listens and acts again. Sadly, this story we finished at the end of chapter 18, but there's more to the story, and sadly Ahab does not turn back to Yahweh. If you keep reading in one of my favourite chapters, Ahab goes and tells Jezebel everything that had happened, and she is very angry, and Elijah has to run. The story is not over. But in what we've heard today, there is one important thing that we can learn and take away. It's easy when we read stories like this about Israel to think something like, those silly people. How could they worship fake gods like Baal? Can't they see that Yahweh is the only one with power? And because you're in this room today, there's a good chance that you agree with me on the overarching truth of this story. That there is only one true God, the Lord, Yahweh. But we, like Israel, can also forget God's power. And we can worship things that aren't Yahweh, hopping between trust in Him and trust in other things. It's hard for us to see that. It's hard for us to see our own idols because they sneak in alongside the things we desire. Good desires, things we want that are from God, like safety and love, fun, or even, a sense of control. Maybe that's not such a good desire, but, we want to believe that we know what's going to happen, that we're going to be taken care of. But when we don't trust God as the only place that those things come from, that is when we start to turn away from Him. In last week's bulletin, there was a really great comment in the Explore notes about recognizing idols by the anger that we feel when they are removed from our lives. And I think this was a really good insight. Recognizing how idols and other gods can creep into our lives in ways that sneak up on us. But there are things that we can do to begin to see them for what they are. There are some questions we can ask. What gives me comfort that isn't God? What is a distraction from God? What would I feel the absence of in my life? What would I be angry about losing? None of the answers that we might give to these questions are the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. None of these things that we might answer with command fire or rain or give us more control of our lives. The truth is that Yahweh is the only God, and he is worth more, is more trustworthy and more faithful and more powerful than anything else in our lives. And we can ask Yahweh to help us see this. So today, I just want to finish with a chance for us to look into our hearts and lives and choose to live as though it is true. There is only one God, Yahweh. So I'm just going to pray a simple prayer like Elijah's. And I want to invite you, as I do, if you are willing and able, to stand or move or put yourself into a posture of worship before Yahweh. So if you would like to stand, you might feel like you want to kneel, anything that you want to do. We're going to do that now, and then I'm going to pray. Yahweh, you are the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Today, let everyone know that you are God in Knightsbridge Baptist Church, in Australia, and in all the earth. Help us to be your servants. Help us to be obedient to all the things you command us to do. Answer our prayers, Lord, that you might be glorified. Help us to know that you are the one and only God. Search our hearts for the fake gods we worship and show them to us. Turn our hearts back to you again. Amen.